Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. Our guests this evening are Minister of Ports and Shipping, Arjun Ranatunga, and Deputy Minister of Policy Planning and Economic Affairs, Dr. Harsha De Silva, who is no strangers to the show, who came in today, but no strangers to the MTV. Starting off with Minister of Ports and Shipping, Arjun Ranatunga. Your pet area is ports. That is clearly evident. 1996 World Cup, you won it. You were spearheading the operation in terms of getting the crown to Sri Lanka in 1996. You were also the chairman of the Sri Lanka Cricket Board for a very short period of time as well. Do you think that the present regime has got it wrong in terms of allocating the ministries to individuals? We saw 3 ministers recently resigning as well, Dilan Pereira and so on and so forth, and today you have 4 ministers and 1 deputy minister. Do you in any way believe that the allocation of ministries was done wrong? That is question number A. B is, what have you taken, what steps have you taken as the minister in charge of ports and shipping to arrest the situation which you call as a dansala in the Minister of Ports and Shipping? What steps have you taken to arrest this situation? The time starts now, Minister.
Coming into your first question, I think I should say that the Honorable President and the Prime Minister both asked me whether I wanted to have sports ministry, which I totally said not to. I was not very keen to have the sports ministry because one issue was people in this country knew what I have done with sports, and still I love the game. When it comes to cricket, I can support the game from outside, and it's a huge honor for me to have a minister like this. Generally, if you take the ministers appointed in the past, it is the senior ministers who has given this job. And the important part was when the ministry was given to me, the first thing the President told me, try and clean this mess up. And I think a lot of people know that I'm very good on cleaning things, and which I did with the Sri Lankan cricket, and I have already started doing it. And the second, your second question, I think allocation of the ministries are done by the President and the Prime Minister. They sit together, discuss whom to give ministries. I'm sure if you analyze the present ministries were given to very important portfolios have been given to very important people. And when it comes to people like Dilan Pereira and Pavitra Vanyarachi, they left for their personal reasons rather than anything else. And it is very important for the SLFP to appoint the portfolios which the President did today in the morning. And coming back to my area, where when it comes to Hambantota, the stage 1, it's $453 million. And stage 2 is $808 million. So you are talking about $1,261 million, which we have to pay about $8 million for a year. And the important issue was that the rates we were given, some of the rates were huge. So we have already started discussing with the banks, and we could get the rate down a little bit, but we are trying to see whether we can get a loan from outside, where we are hoping that we will get a very decent loan to try and pay up and pay for this bank and start new. So it's not an easy job. The mess they have done in the last 5 years, I think that is where I feel very sad. Some of the things we have to do is to clean up and get things in order rather than try to improve things for the future. But what we have done with the board, what we discussed with the board, is to try and sort out some of the issues we have. But in the meantime, we are speaking to the investors. We are trying to see whether they are interested in coming. I'll tell you honestly, there are a lot of people who are interested in coming, mainly because they trust the present government.
Thank you very much, Minister Arjun Ranatunga. Moving to Dr. Harsha De Silva. The former president, Chandrika Bandaranaike said that the present regime does not have money. Are we broke? That is question number one. Question number two is, Minister Arjun Ranatunga said that he is looking at getting loans for the future of the ports and shipping authorities and even the ministry. Is it healthy? You have been a consultant economist for a long time, Dr. Harsha De Silva. I know you've been working with key organizations as well. Looking at getting loans.
Okay.
And are we broke?
I'll answer the first question. Let us just think of ourselves, okay? Let us assume that we bring in, say, 50,000 rupees a month. I've upped it by 20,000 because he didn't like the 30,000 number. Now we bring in 50,000 rupees a month. Now suppose the debt I have to repay that month is 55,000 rupees. Just think about that, right? How would you manage? You have to get a loan from somewhere else to find that 5,000 in addition to what you bring or brought home, plus you have to feed your kids, you have to send them to school, you have to put fuel in your vehicle, right? You have to pay for tuition and everything else that comes with it, medicine. How do you do that? You have to get another loan. Now shall I tell you the present situation as at December 31st, 2014. The government has two major sources of, actually one major source of revenue, that is tax. We tax dal, we tax milk powder, we tax diesel, we tax reload cards, we tax every damn thing possible. We also tax people on their income and they hardly ever pay. So bulk of the tax is what we call regressive, and it is taken in from what normal people buy. Now that came to 1,050 billion rupees. 1,050 billion rupees. Look at what Sri Lanka had to pay in 2014 as debt only. Repay as debt only was 1,076 billion. So you tell me, Samir, whether we are bankrupt or broke or in trouble or in a crisis or not.
Taking this into account,
No, you tell me.
I'm asking you a question back. Unfortunately, I am the one who is asking the questions today, Dr. Harsha De Silva. On a personal platform, we can definitely discuss, and I will definitely
what I'm
express
saying,
my opinions
what
to you
I'm saying
about this.
is, it is semantics. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, the amount we have to pay out as
I agree with what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at what Minister Arjun Ranatunga said.
Yeah.
He's looking at obtaining more loans.
Yeah.
So is that healthy to the country's economy?
You know, I want to pick up something from what he said about the $455 million. In fact, it was, before the rock was $300 million, which we took at LIBOR plus 90 basis points. And actually, Arjun, I'm the guy who have been talking about this for the last 3-4 years in Parliament, and I want you to look into this. And when LIBOR fell, that is the international interest rates, LIBOR fell from about 5% to about 2.5% at the time, and then subsequently about 1%, and currently it's at around 0.5%. They fixed it at 6.3.
This is something I was just about to come out.
Yeah, because it is in the Hansard. I have actually physically explained this whole thing. 45 billion rupees. 45 billion rupees, right? The rate was adjusted on a cabinet paper. The rate should have been, as of today, 1.3%. But we are paying 6.3%, right? So when you talk about, when Arjuna talked about loans and saying we are paying high rates, I mean, this is crazy.
Has the UNP government committed any mistakes during the last 5 months, starting 8 January 2015?
Nobody is perfect. Nobody is perfect. You know, UNP, PA, various others, JHU, we are the government. Arjuna is from the SLFP.
It's not a UNP government. It's a
It's a national government.
It's a national government. Yeah.
So you know, when people want to blame somebody, they say UNP government. when they say something good.
This national government, have they committed any mistakes?
Mistakes have happened.
Like what?
I mean, you can, I'm not going to, you know, if you, there are little things that have happened. You know, we could have done better. We could have avoided some things. But some may have been blown totally out of proportion, right? But we could have, you know, we are not perfect, right? That's my answer.
I open the questions to the journalists, and we'll start off with Faraz. He was silent for some time, so Faraz, pose a question to the Deputy Minister, I believe. Yes.
Right. Okay. So was one of these mistakes the Treasury bond for 30 years?
Well, I mean, we are getting the most amount of flack on that. On that, certainly, yes.
Was that a mistake?
I think we have been done better. We could have avoided this unnecessary negative publicity on it. Yes.
Right. I just want to ask you another question about corruption. One of your ministers, I think it was the foreign minister, said that Mr. Rajapaksa and his associates have spirited away $18 billion US. Is that possible?
I don't know the figure, but we have credible information to believe that large amounts of money has been taken away from this country.
But $18 billion, that's, you know, the on average, the spend, the public spend during the Rajapaksa years was on average approximately 50 billion. So then, and the public spend was 6%, right? So that's about 3 billion a year.
Yeah.
Times 9 is 27 billion. Then 18 from 27 only leaves 9 billion. So did he build the roads? Did he do all these fancy projects just with 9 billion?
I don't think we need to get carried away with that 18 billion figure for us. You know, it really doesn't matter whether it is 18 billion or 8 billion. You know, we'll find out at some point in time. The FBI is looking into it, the DOJ is looking into it, the World Bank Star Program is looking into it, the Interpol is looking into it. I mean, the Swiss are looking into it, the Indians are looking into it. But keep in mind, these things take a long time to pinpoint. Because if you really look at the case of Seychelles, right, there are companies inside companies inside companies. It's all hidden and stashed away. It is like a maze, right? So you, to find out, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, because these are professional criminals who have done this. Right? They have ensured that they go through particular jurisdictions like BVI or Seychelles or wherever, that it is almost impossible to locate this. So until we get a fair hold on the trace, then we will find out. Money that was robbed by Marcos, only very small amount was ever found. The money that was stashed away by Lukashenko recently in Ukraine was traced back to Seychelles, right? So it's complex, but at this time we are on it. It will take a while to find this money.
Are you all investigating this on your own, or have you got a professional investigator to look at it?
No, we have the support of the global investigative divisions of various governments.
Deputy Minister, in your opening statement you spoke of the need of creating a social market economy. This is essentially a local concept. President Maithripala Sirisena said Sri Lanka will be a non-aligned state, is a non-aligned state. Going forward, how is this going to impact investment to Sri Lanka?
Sri Lanka has had a sorry history in the recent past with investments. You see, when JRJ opened up the economy in 77, 78, there was no private sector. He had to spend the money. Everything was government done, right? The private sector was created after 77, 78, right? People started doing small businesses, buying a Delica van, you know, and companies improving. You know, the John Keelses of this world didn't exist. But now it's a different story. From 77, 78 to 2015, we still don't have to rely on the same model of government investing by taking money from various Chinese or various Indian or various American or whoever it is people at fairly high rates. We need foreign direct investment. And if you look at, I had the opportunity to sit one day with a gentleman by the name of Daniel Kaufman. He is a fellow at the Brookings Institute. For 2-3 hours, he showed me on his 2 computers. He had, you know, well-known economists. He had 2 computers. He has been studying investments, Arjuna, and governance in 100-odd countries for 30-odd years, right? And he said very clearly, Harsha, look at this. You have good governance, investors will come, like Arjuna said. You have to have confidence. You have to know that your money is safe. One fine day, one Rajapaksa gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to nationalize 36 companies because I don't like your face or I don't like their face. Won't do it.
But your Prime Minister is doing the same thing. He wants the Colombo port city stopped.
No, I don't think so. I think what it is it has to go through the system that
Right
it is
process.
required to go through.
Go through the right process.
Right?
There is a
Dr.
process
Harsha
in
De
place,
Silva,
for a second, there is a process in place with regard to the Port City project. For us, I want to have, there is a question from one of the Facebook fans directed to Minister Arjun Ranatunga. The operation at Ratnamani Airport has expanded over recent months. Are there plans to expand this airport to become Colombo's second international airport?
I don't know whether they have a new idea, but when I was a minister, what we were keen on to try and see the Colombo airport as the domestic hub and try to get all the domestic flying from the Ratmalane airport. But I really don't know whether they have different plans. I don't think we can expand that. It's not the ideal place. We don't have enough room to expand that airport, so I have my doubts.
Nadeem?
Thank you, Shami. Dr. Harsha De Silva, I'd like to ask you about treasury bills, actually. Earlier in the year, when the government tried to get some finances by increasing the treasury bill ceiling from 800 billion to 1,200, I believe it was, billion. This measure was defeated in Parliament. You said that the opposition would have to be held accountable for this and have to answer to the people, because now you would have to get financing from somewhere at high interest rates. Now there is a no confidence motion that is coming against the Prime Minister and the government. We heard MP Mahindanand Algamage say yesterday that it would be brought to Parliament on the 9th. Given what happened with the treasury bills, do you A, think that the no confidence motion is a credible threat to this national government, and B, have you been forced to get any foreign loans at incendiary interest rates to actually make up for the money that you couldn't make through the short-term instrument, which is the treasury bills?
I'll answer the middle question first, which is, no, I mean, I heard the President had said, I read in the newspapers this morning, choose whether you want the 20th Amendment or the no confidence motion. And the President had said he is not supporting the no confidence motion against the Prime Minister. Right? That ends there. Right? That ends there. There is no discussion about it. But I'll answer your first and third now. You know, that no confidence or the
treasury bill
that we got voted down was an unusual situation. Usually these bills, these are not bills really, regulations, you know, amendments are never put to vote. I've been in this Parliament for 5 years. I've never seen a situation such as that. Suddenly they wanted, when we were not even present, I was present, several of us were not present, they were at other important activities outside Parliament. As ministers, they have to attend to those things as well. They sort of, like a guerrilla warfare type thing,
So it was an
guerrilla
ambush.
attack, suddenly came from nowhere, asked for a vote, and we got voted down. But the message that was taken to the country was that we were trying to raise the debt ceiling. It was not raising the debt ceiling, it was within the debt limit. We were trying to raise the amount of money that could have been raised through treasury bills, because for some archaic unknown reason there is a limit only for treasury bills, not for treasury bonds or not for rupee securities or anything like that. So we wanted to give us that space because yields were falling, and as any right treasurer would do, you would try to leverage on what is available, arbitrage whenever possible, minimize the cost of borrowing to the government. That's what we were trying to do. And the third question now, foreign loans. I just told you about a foreign loan. I mean, this is preposterous. I think you need to investigate this, right? I mean, how, on what basis did this happen? I mean, you're talking of losses in the billions.
But this is a loan that was taken by the previous government.
Yeah.
That is fixed. I'm saying, have you been made to take any foreign loans?
Well, you look at the book, right? I told you at the beginning that we cannot survive without loans even to pay our debt. So yes, we have to borrow, right?
Have you borrowed?
We haven't still borrowed in the forex markets yet, right? The plan was for the previous government in the first quarter of this year to go out to the market with euro bonds for $1,500 million, right? That hasn't still happened, right? For various reasons. So yes, that money will have to be raised. Either we raise it in the Eurobond market or we raise it in the local market. It depends on what's happening with interest rates in the US. I mean, what's happened in the US lately is that the quantitative easing is stopping and yields are rising. So we have to time it, right? On the other hand, the Japanese economy is slowing down again, the Chinese economy is slowing down again. So there will be money that is not going to those countries. Sri Lankan interest rates have fallen, yield curves have fallen, so there are possibilities. So we are looking at a menu that includes everything in rupee denominated securities to
Dr. De Silva, before we run out of time, there's one more question. Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, a well-known economist in the country, said this week that focus needs to shift now from constitutional reform to economic management. What he said is that there isn't really any economic management happening in the country at the moment. Is this true? Is the government not managing the economy? And because in the backdrop that several international ratings agencies and so on and so forth have already downgraded our growth forecast for this year.
Indrajit is a dear friend, a respected friend, and we have regular discussions. And yes, I agree with him in that our focus now must move on from the constitution, democracy's angle to a greater focus on the economy. It is going to be the economy, right? Unless we do the reforms and get what I talked to you about. Think of it, competitive factors. You put money into our competitive factors, create competition. Competitive processes. The port is a great example. Arjun, I was thinking when you were saying, look at what will happen to Dubai without the port and the airport. What will be Singapore without the port and the airport? What would be Hong Kong without the port and the airport? Now think of the situation, what can Sri Lanka be with a good port and a good airport? The world is out there to be captured. We are located at the right place. Right, we have an enormous opportunity to take this country from where we are to where we want to go. So, yes, we need to do the reforms. That is the second piece, competitive processes.
Minister Ranatunga, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, is it strong?
I think
you are the organizer for the Aptanagal electorate now. You were appointed recently. Is the Sri Lanka Freedom Party strong?
I think we have to rebuild it. Tell you honestly, SLFP has been very unpopular in the last couple of years doing unwanted things, and that is the reason that the former President Mahinda Rajapaksa has to get away. Maithripala Sirisena, who was, we knew who Maithripala Sirisena was, but he was not a so-called national leader. He was a very good minister, honest person, but it was the policy where we brought him to the presidency, and it was the concepts we brought him to the presidency, and that is something he implemented as soon as he came into power, bringing the 19th Amendment. And I'm sure when it comes to SLFP, we need to go into the grassroots level, and we need to show that we are honest, we are not corrupt. It is the previous people, not the present guys. We need to pick the right people, not the corrupt guys. I'm a great believer that when we give nominations, we need to give right people, not the bookie guys, casino guys, the ethanol business people who has been living in the parliament for last so many years, and it should stop. We need, it's not only the SLFP, even the UNP, we all sit together. I think that's why I always said this is the best time we can get this parliament right.
There are allegations, Minister Ranatunga, stating that the United National Party leadership is trying to split the Sri Lanka Freedom Party before an election. What are your thoughts on this?
I don't think, I think they are in a very strong seat as far as I see, because people wanted a change. Now, especially with the corruption happened in the last government, people look at a different line, and it is up to the SLFP to show the nation, show the people, it is not SLFP, it is one particular group who ruined this country, not the SLFP. This is the message we have to take to the village. But unfortunately, we are doing it in a practical way. I have no issues in Athanagala where people comes to me whether SLFP or UNP. And you mentioned about Mahinda Ananda Alutgamage saying bringing the no confidence motion to the parliament to the Prime Minister. Is that the important thing for the SLFP? This is not the SLFP. The important thing for the SLFP should be the 20th Amendment. Work on the 20th Amendment. This is something promised by the present SLFP.
The Sri Lanka Freedom Party
is the UNP.
Give me a second. The Sri Lanka Freedom Party is split, that means, isn't it?
No, Sri Lanka Freedom Party, there are different elements work with the former president still. I'm not going to hide that. The people who has been corrupt, who has been targeted badly in the last so many elections, are still behind them. I'll tell you a story. I saw a couple of guys came to meet the present president and put their case and say, these are the problems I face. He never allowed them, he never said, I will save you. When these people came out, what they said, when I go to the former person, he will say, don't worry, I'll safeguard you. This is the difference between the present leadership and the former leadership. We could see that from the meetings, and as far as I'm concerned, the important factor is for SLFP to implement the 20th Amendment. Who wants to implement the 20th Amendment? The present leadership in the SLFP and our leader, Maithripala Sirisena, President wants to implement this. If they are not supporting and trying to bring no confidence motion to the Prime Minister, is this the attitude we are going to adopt?
Mr. Ranatunga, is the UNP trying to sabotage the 20th Amendment?
I don't think so. I think we work very close to each other. We have discussions in the cabinet. We have arguments in the cabinet. But ultimately what we have decided now for the Prime Minister and the President to sit with the smaller parties and take a decision. I think both SLFP and UNP are very keen on the 20th, but we have an issue with some of the smaller parties where we need to look into, and I'm sure ultimately it will come through.
Minister Ranatunga, you have been given a very complex ministry portfolio in the sense that there were quite a few allegations of corruption, which you said in your words you have to clean up. Now, one of today's newspapers said that 600 million rupees has been deposited to the account of a foundation held by one of the former minister's wives by the company named Colombo International Container Terminal, which was doing construction work for the Colombo harbour. Now, this is one such incident. what is the status with regard to investigations pertaining to this? And can we look at an actual timeline, or at least a tentative timeline, where all these investigations can be concluded and people can be people can have some sort of closure regarding the accountability of these culprits?
I'll tell you, I totally agree with you. I'm desperate as well, but we need to go on the right track. I think that's the exact thing I said when I started this. When I started my conversation, I said we don't want to do the same thing what the previous government did. We have appointed a committee, and I'm sure that as soon as we get the committee report, we need to give it to the AG. We have to get advice from the Attorney General to proceed with the process, and it will be done by the AG. And we appointed Mr. Nalin Ladhuhetty very recently, because that we were very keen on getting the port into the right track rather than looking after, going behind all the corruption issues. And I'm sure you give us little time, all these culprits will be shown to the public.
For us?
Just to go back to what you said before about the ships and the purchase of that. What are you going to do about the officials responsible for having paid too much money for these ships? Are you going to prosecute them? Have you reported them to the FCID?
I think when we get this investigation report, I'm sure that everything will be covered. The important part is, we all thought Sri Lankan Airlines is a mess, but this is almost 100 times compared to the Sri Lankan Airlines. So that is the reason that we got a very prominent person to come in and tell you honestly, he's doing it free with the other two person. I still can't remember the other two guys, supported by about 5-6 lawyers, and I'm sure that we can get a report as soon as possible.
Nadir, one more question for you if you want to.
Yes, this is to Deputy Minister Dr. Harsha De Silva. Can you tell us exactly where the country stands in terms of our foreign reserves? I'll follow that up with another question. Where do we stand with foreign reserves?
Well, the net reserves have always been very low. There were stories that our reserves had risen to 8 billion, 9 billion and so on. But that includes the debt they have taken. So you have 5 billion reserves, you take a $1.5 billion loan, put that in your reserve for a while, and then you say, look, our reserves are going up. But the reserves that are being built using surplus of exports, right, is not that much. So I am looking at a realistic number, which is not just piling up of debt into reserves.
So minus debt, what are our reserves?
Yeah, they've been around, $2 billion, something like that.
That's all?
Yeah, that's
minus debt, Sri Lanka's foreign reserves amount to $2 billion.
No, yeah, if you look at what the net reserves, I don't have the exact number, but it is not anything near this 8-9 billion that we've been talking about. And that is available. If you look at it's on the website, Central Bank has not been reporting this number for a long time. But if you go to the IMF report, Article 4 report, they have all the data available.
Dr. De Silva, my follow-up to that is, now, you say that our foreign reserves have fallen to about, roughly, let's say, your estimation is about 2 billion.
No, that I'm saying, don't now spin this, right? Because when you talk about reserves, it also includes, we saw how this whole bond issue was also spun out of control. Right? I don't want this to go that way. But the total reserves are about 7 billion or something like that, including debt, yes.
Including debt.
Dr. De Silva, just on the bond issue, what are your thoughts on appointing a foreign national as the governor of the central bank? This was posted on the Facebook page as well. What are your thoughts on this?
You see, I read Professor G.L.P. Risser's entire argument on how if you are not a citizen, how you could then be loyal to this country and so on. But Mr. Mahendran is working on a working visa and he has no legal impediments in doing the job. If you think of foreign nationals being governors of central banks, Sri Lanka is not an exception. There are many countries where foreigners are holding the position of governors of other countries. Even John Exeter, the first governor of the central bank, was an American citizen. Honestly, I don't think it's a big issue. You know, if a person is doing a good job, if he is capable of doing a good job, in this global world that we live in today, people travel, you know, all over the place.
But he admits to a lapse, Dr. Harsha. Mr. Mahendran admits to MTV. He says he forgot, or he couldn't, or whatever. He made a mistake. He didn't let the primary dealers know that the requirement had changed from $1 billion to 10. And using what you said earlier, if the requirement was so urgent, you all could have merely gone and got an OD at the Banker Salon and did a fresh bond the following week.
You see, as a former treasurer myself, you know, it is all about managing the requirement. There are n number of options available. There is no cast in stone, you do this, you do that, right?
But quite a lot of it is cast in stone in the manual that guides the public debt department.
No, the whole issue for us is a lot of people have not understood this entire transaction.
Now what we do understand is 1 billion changed to 10 billion, the interest rates were around 9.5%, that was the indicative rate, and all of a sudden 5.05 billion was given to one company at 12.3%.
No, that company was not given all of that at 12.3%.
Well, they were, because one of the bids was by proxy.
Yeah, that 2 billion was given. Actually, the three-person committee says that there must be a full investigation on perpetual treasuries.
Quite.
Right? And that has to happen at some point.
So in the meantime, so when this three-member committee says that, then obviously there seems to be a prima facie case, right? So if that is the case, then how come and on whose authority has Mr. Mahendran returned to work?
No, Mr. Mahendran and Mr. Aloysius are two different entities, right? So what the report says is there is no direct evidence at this time that Mr. Mahendran has
let the Deputy Minister answer.
Done anything that directly responsible. That's why it says at that point there is no direct evidence of anything. But in the case of Mr. Aloysius, the three-member committee says you should look into it, and the report was just released a week ago, and now it will take its process. Like Arjuna said, there is a Yahapalaniya way of doing things, and that will have to go to the AG's department and so on and so forth, and it will happen. Because, you know, at the beginning people were saying, look, why are you not putting X in jail, Y in jail? It took almost 3 months for the Yahapalaniya process to get activated. So, I mean, there are so many possibilities for us, you know this very well, right? And that there are so many questions, so there is no direct, as far as I see.
For us, we need to go for a break. You have to make your question very quick and very precise.
Indeed, but don't you think, Doctor, that in terms of, at least in terms of PR, it would have been better if Mr. Mahendran was set aside, let this thing go ahead, and then solve the issue?
Perhaps.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for us. Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Harsha and also Minister Arjun Ranatunga. Minister Arjun Ranatunga said more needs to be done. Focus should be on the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. Dr. Harsha De Silva said mistakes were committed. However, we are not broke. Everyone makes mistakes. Will these mistakes be the turning point? Let's hear the closing remarks after this short commercial break. Stay connected. Stay with Face the Nation. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We are in conversation with Arjun Ranatunga, Minister of Ports and Shipping, and Deputy Minister Harsha De Silva, who is the Deputy Minister of Policy Planning and Economic Affairs. We are talking about good governance, change, and also the country's economy. The final round, we start off with Deputy Minister Harsha De Silva. A few questions that I thought were not exactly responded to, the questions posed by the journalists and even myself, Dr. De Silva. Question number A. You spoke about John Exeter, who was the first governor in Sri Lanka. In his Exeter report, he says a governor whose integrity is questioned cannot remain in the post. In that context, how does the present governor remain in his post? Question number A. Question number B is, you said mistakes were committed. If so, what is the way forward for a country like Sri Lanka? Your time starts now, 3 minutes. Here you go. Start.
John Exeter was sent here by the Federal Reserve to set up the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Exeter did a wonderful job in setting up this institution, which for the longest time has been run by people of utmost brilliance and integrity. And we don't want that changed, even though in the last several years we've had questions being raised on how the central bank was run, whether any or rather, let me rephrase, whether the Monetary Law Act under which the central bank is operating were breached, were there securities fraud, was the EPF money used to benefit friends and relations, was there insider trading both in the stock market, in the bond market. Multiple questions I myself have raised in Parliament over the last so many years. Now, the Exeter report is a guideline, or it's perhaps you may want to call it a Bible, but it is not the law. The law is the MLA, and the law and ethics sometimes are not the same thing. Court can be moved, and lawyers can say ethics is one, law is another. So how do you deal with it? So in good governance, what is the balance? So that is what we need to really look at. And then I'll move into the other thing about mistakes. Yes, mistakes are being made every day by everybody. We make mistakes today, but if we don't learn from our mistakes, then there's no point in that whole exercise. And also mistakes are relative, right? Mistakes may have been made because of incompetence, because you didn't look at the whole picture before you took a decisions, or you could just say, oh, it was a mistake, and done it purposely. So those mistakes also are not the same thing. So I think we are on the right track. I had the honor of presenting to the President the report of the 100 days. He and I had a chat. He asked me, Harsha, how much you think we have achieved? I told him, sir, maybe 65–70% we have achieved. He said, I also think so. But that's very good, isn't it, Harsha? I said, yes, Mr. President. I think it is damn good for 100 days to have done what we have done, right? So we are on the right track. Give us the opportunity to prove to this country and the world that Sri Lanka can be taken from where it is to where it needs to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Moving on to the Minister of Ports and Shipping, Mr. Arjun Ranatunga. Minister Ranatunga, Dr. Harsha De Silva said mistakes were committed. The Sri Lanka Freedom Party is headed by the President Maithripala Sirisena. Are you in agreement with this, A? B is, Dr. Harsha De Silva said ports are needed, and he quipped several countries, Hong Kong and even Singapore. We have a port in Hambantota. How are we to put this into good use? The time starts now, 3 minutes.
I'll start with the second one. I think we were earning a lot of money through the ports in Sri Lanka, especially the Colombo one. I think what has happened was with the implementation of the Hambantota port, where we have spent a lot of money, almost double the money, and we have taken loans for high rates. That's something I told earlier, like what we are trying to do is to try and get some loans for a lower rate and pay these high rate loans, and that is the key issue where we are addressing. And if we have done what we have done now, we have divide these two into two different entities. Hambantota runs in a different account and Colombo runs in a different account. Then we can see the losses and pluses in both ports. And it is very important to improve the ports. You know that we are a very lucky country where we have natural ports, where it has been neglected. We should have spent more money and maybe infrastructure in Trinco rather than Hambantota. Hambantota is a very important area where we should have done it in a lesser amount, where we should have been gaining money now, collecting money rather than paying loans. And coming back to the SLFP, I have to honestly say that there's a group who was objecting to the 19th Amendment. We all saw that in the Parliament. We were trying to convince them it's a element where controlled by the former president. And these are the guys who are trying to come out and try to disturb the 19th Amendment. That's why I earlier said I give a lot of credit to the President and the Prime Minister for the patience they had. And coming back to the second one, I think it's very, very important for the country to implement the 20th Amendment as soon as possible. People supported us, the present regime, to implement 19th and 20th, which we did with the 19th, 20th. We have some issues. I'm sure with the blessings of all the smaller parties, we might be able to do that as soon as possible. Coming back to the SLFP, I only wish some of these SLFPs who are controlled by different elements should be thinking of SLFP, not thinking of the leaders. The problem was we always looking and serving for the leaders rather than their parties. And the other important factor was we are not looking at serving for the country. They will do anything to protect their leaders rather than the country. I think it's high time that we need to change. I think that's why I always said we SLFP need to show the country that we are a different SLFP, not the previous SLFP where it was rejected by the former, rejected by the people in this country. And it's high time that we should show the public and get faith and go for the election and see whether we can form our own government.
Mr. Ranathuka, very quickly, I'm going to take 20 seconds more for this. Dr. Harsha De Silva said mistakes were committed. You are a cabinet minister. You somewhat have to take responsibility for it, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that it's important fact is like what Harsha said, whatever the mistakes we have done, we need to analyze and not to do the mistakes again. As far as I'm concerned, I have run this port, the ministry quite well, and I'm sure that the important factor for me to show the public that it's corruption free. That is my target. I'm sure that I'm going to achieve that before we go for the next election.
Thank you very much for joining us, Deputy Minister Harsha De Silva and also Minister Arjuna Ranatunga. Dr. Harsha De Silva said, a social market economy is the focus of this government. However, greater emphasis is needed on the country's economy, at least now. Minister Arjuna Ranatunga said, it's not a dansala, it's all about doing business. I leave you tonight with a quote. If yesterday was a challenge and today is a battle, tomorrow will be an incredible experience. Now, this is what the people of Sri Lanka are aspiring for. Are we on the right track? I leave it for the people to decide. Thank you very much for joining us. Good evening and good night to each and every one of you. And we meet you next week, same time, same place on Face the Nation. Until then, take care and good night.